Hello, Humane marketers. Sarah Znakrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hey, Mark, so good to speak to you, see you, hear you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, it's so great to finally have this conversation. We've been talking about having you come to a Humane Marketing Podcast for a while. Full disclosure, I said it in the intro, you are my personal web guy. So we just want to say that up front. But I couldn't think of a better person to, have this conversation with around kind of the marriage between the human connection and tech. Because I'm often kind of challenged on this thing about technology, because I do say, yeah, we kind of went overdrive with the technology bit and it's time to come back to the human connection. But I never say, let's, go back to the Stone Age and ditch all technology. I think we really need to learn how to use both. And that's kind of what we're here to discuss. So I'm really looking forward to it. We positioned this conversation under the P of product, because I think, nowadays anybody who has either sells products or services, well, they need a website. So I think that's where I think it's a good place to start. So if you think about, a new business owner, just kind of like, okay, I need a website. Where do I start? Where would you tell them to start?
Well, it usually depends where they come from, but I'm not just the typical, I'll do a website, for a couple of $100 type of person. I really think it's important to start with a strategy behind the website, and that entails a few things. Like, obviously you have to know if they've got a business in the first place, or if they're starting a new one, and how they see the website fitting into the business. And I think people underestimate the strategy part of it. I mean, there's a few things that happen in the past whenever of just, I'll build your website, when I said that, it sort of turns me into a commodity, and then they sort of become like this, whip wielding, kind of do this, do that. And they don't really get the value of me and my insights in that regard. So that's why I position myself more as a digital consultant and website developer than actually, just somebody builds websites. So some of the things, go on, Sarah.
Yeah, what does this strategy involve? Because that's kind of a word we throw around, but in terms of website building, what are some of the things you discuss with clients?
Well, first of all, I look at how the website fits into the greater marketing plan, because some people think you build a website and they'll get a flood of people coming. Mm-hmm. So how's the website going to help you achieve your goal? And most people I have sort of different markets. A lot of them are like coaches and course creators, and the website's there to actually create that relationship. We talk about the human touch, but sometimes people have to lower their shields enough to even reach out by an email to book a consultation. I mean, for me, I don't like to reach out to a person unless I feel comfortable doing so. So if the website strategy is like, I don't like to use the word lead generation, because sort of thoughts come to my head about, somebody jump grabbing you on a call and trying to sell you something. But let's say it's to get somebody on the phone, having a conversation, because that's one of the most valuable places you can get somebody to. Then your website can really fortify you in that area. by actually telling people through the homepage what it is exactly you do. And you don't have to use all this high-pitched language I've seen people do in the past, but just more or less be very clear on what it is you do, who you help, if you can help them, and, just invite them to have a call in the case of the coaches, right? Invite them, here's how I can help you. Let's see if you want to if you want to get in the chat. Here's my Calendly link or something. I've got a colleague who does this. I use a contact form first so that not anybody can just grab my Calendly link, quite honestly. That's depending on where the website wants, how it's going to fit into the plan of going from A to Z in terms of the whole, marketing rotation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's kind of this path I talk about in the second book, Selling Like We're Human. It's like you want to take your people on a gentle sales path. And that does start with the website very often. It might start at a networking event, but in our case, let's say it starts on the website. And you're right, it's always about thinking, well, what do you want for them to take as a next step? And that's not, pushing them into that direction. But if you're not clear, well, then they're definitely not clear of what their next step is. And so they're going to leave again. So is their next step an opt-in, or is it in the coach's case, maybe directly a conversation with you? You need to think about that. And that's kind of what I think you mean by strategy. How does your website fit into the bigger picture? What are the services you're offering? Are you selling products, et cetera, right?
How does it move them along? Because the website might be as simple as somebody just booking in to have a call with you and learning more about you. There's different goals for the website, and sometimes it's not they're going to land on your website and then B, they're going to take the goal. It might be they're going to read your blog post first, learn more about you, or they're going to check out your portfolio if you like a web designer, right?
Right.
So it's basically getting people comfortable with you and just showing your human side.
Right.
Always have a headshot too.
Yeah, well, that kind of goes more into the content already. And I guess, is that the next step? I think people would probably think that's maybe not even when they come to someone to help them with the web design, they probably just think, okay, the tech. Maybe they don't even think, well, they definitely don't think strategy. Maybe they don't even think content, but content is probably the next step after strategy, right?
That is correct. And I will tell you, there's kind of an iterative process, because a lot of the times when my clients are supposed to come up with the content, which can be it can be like pulling teeth. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we do dive into the next step and then back to content, because it's kind of draining to write an entire website of all these different pages. And then they're feeling like disillusioned, like, well, where's the visual thing coming into it? Mm-hmm. But going back to content, they all build on each other, right? They layer. So you look at the strategy, right? Without the strategy, you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what your offer is. Like, they might know, I do coaching on, let's say, relationships, but they don't know how they're going to package that offer. Mm-hmm. They don't know the people they're going after. Like, you could say a relationship coach for women, right? That is very, very broad. Right. So that's why the strategy must be done first. And then the content is basically the words they use to actually show people their value, and almost like a journey. Each page in of itself, I have like a structure depending on the niche. I usually work with coaches, as I said, and course creators, but the pages are typically like, you always see that big hero unit. For people who don't know what that is, the first thing people land on when they go to a homepage, which is typically what they're going to when they're trying to check you out, is that big section that usually has, in your case, a Sarah Center Crochet, one of your websites, you have your picture here. People get to know a bit of you because you're the brand, but they also see the headline of what you're about, and that's important. And then in the things below the fold, like, I'm just saying content is really important, and it builds on the strategy. And that is the biggest place people will tumble, especially if they give you a copy and paste, nightmare of text, or worse still, they don't have any content. They give you like, one family member gave me like 2 lines per page. So in the end, I'll become the copywriter as well sometimes, an extra service.
Yeah. It's kind of similar. The struggle sounds very similar to what I'm dealing with in marketing. People want to hire a marketer to just go out there and create ad campaigns. Like, I need to do Facebook ads. But if you haven't actually done the deeper work, in my case, it's the 7 Ps mandala. It's like, if you haven't done the deeper work and know who you are, what your values are, what obviously also what your offering is, who your people are, and only then your price, you need to know your price. You talked about package. Well, for me, it's pricing, and that includes packaging, right? Well, only then are you ready really to go into promotion. And it sounds to me like without this reflection, you're not even ready to put up a website, because how are you gonna, have the content to put into those pages if you haven't actually taken time to, go into that deeper reflection?
That is very true. I see it a lot more than I care to see it, quite honestly. But at the same time, it actually gives me the ability to give them a bit of coaching beforehand,
right?
Which for a lot of people can actually be an extra service. People say, well, you're not actually ready at the point where you need to do the website. You need to get, your stuff in order. So let's have a couple of sessions where I can help you in some kind of workshop, fit those pieces together, the strategy, the content, and that's even before the tech stuff, right? So it's an opportunity.
Yeah, it is. It's good to see that you have realized that opportunity, because I'm sure that there's still a lot of web tech guys out there who are like, yeah, but I don't do that stuff. And so, because I've heard story after story of clients who are stalling with their website. This website is still not up, even though they hired a web guy, and the web guy just says, well, come back to me when you have your content. And so it's like this floating website that is never going to get done because they don't get the help they need. So, either you help them directly or you refer them to, someone who can coach them through actually getting, all of these things together. Because
exactly.
It's really not just the design and tech, and those are the last steps in the things that we want to talk about. So let's talk about design, and then finally the tech part.
So design obviously does play an important role because it's, the visual appeal of your website. And that's one of the pieces where you just really need to understand their branding from, obviously from the first two parts. So you all build on each other. So if they're a dentist and they're trying to appeal to the upper echelons, I mean, you wouldn't actually paint a website that's like a rock band website, with like a black background with kind of grungy, grungy heavy metal, like tooth decay, right? So just like online entrepreneurs, you have to be very aware of how the visual design from the font type to the colors to even the way the position on the page fit into, how they want to be seen as part of their branding. A lot of people, they'll confuse logos as the branding, but it is part of the branding and it needs to be reflected, but it's not obviously the main part. It's important that everything is reflected. So that's where the design comes in. People often have a hard time with that, especially a lot of people are not visual. And sometimes they'll have a designer even do a Photoshop. Like a lot of people I've worked with, well, not a lot, a few people had this PSD Photoshop file where I'll actually create that design. I think of a client years ago who was a movie producer. Back then we didn't have that, we weren't blessed with some of the tools we have today. So as a programmer and code wrangler, I was able to pull it together. And then, so there are templates out there too that can give you a head start for anybody, needing to get that visual, cue.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a certain level of design that you can help your clients with, like if they have no idea and this is their first business and they're just starting out. There's a certain flexibility on WordPress. We're going to talk about WordPress in a minute, but it is limited somehow. Like eventually, I share my rebranding story and how I hired Nela, the designer who came up with the beautiful design for Humane marketing. Well, that I had to go, actually to someone who made design their business. And so that's another thing that often is, when you first started out, you're like, well, I thought, the web person is, doing everything. I'm like, well, they're different. They're still different jobs. Yes, Mark can help you with a beautiful website to a certain extent. But then if you want to go to another level of design, well, then you need to actually hire an artist or, someone who has those skills. And so that's what we did, for example, for both of my sites. Actually, Nela didn't do the first one, but I worked with Kat, another designer. And so they gave us the files that then you used for the actual tech part. So it's like really different layers and stages to create a website. So now let's get to the tech, and I know that you have been a fan of WordPress for many years. That's kind of where what you built your business on as well. Is that still the number one site building tool that you would recommend, or are there others?
I would say that is the number one site I would recommend, but I'm not going to push a client who's not sold on that. I'll say, here's my friend, Joe, who can do Wix if that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I believe it is the most, sound platform out there. And in the past 2 months, I believe that more than ever, the people at WordPress, at Automatic, have revamped the entire code base so that the performance is like lightning fast now, even without caching. But then you add very special caching plugins, like one of the ones I added for you, which was a premium one, and your site can actually potentially be lightning fast. Although it does obviously depend on the host as well, and how, like there are some hosts that have additional caching on the server. So with WordPress, it's really no reason you can't get a lightning fast site that can rank like 98 and 99 and even 100% green in the Google Insights. And that's what I've gotten for a few of my clients and myself. Just by, and it wouldn't have been possible was it not for WordPress's recent developments and also obviously my optimizations.
It sounds like they're really constant in upping their game. It's not like some other kind of free website building things where you're like, do they just want to make money, or do they really want to have a stable ongoing website kind of delivery? So
they want to have the impact, not just the market share.
Yeah, exactly. So talk to us about the rest of the tech. There's the WordPress, the main site, but then there's all these other things around it, like the plugins, but also, membership sites and all of that. Talk to us a bit about that.
So the tech can kind of get a bit tedious in terms of configuring, dragging things around in page builders when you have the design. It's kind of where I shine the most, but sometimes it's something I could easily pass off to a team member, if that makes sense. But WordPress is, as I said, it's very flexible. So obviously you'd have a theme for WordPress. You've got to get a theme. I only stick to what I like to be known for. So I will use the Astra theme. I will not even deviate. And I will use the Elemental page builder, because those two items, the page builder and the theme, literally work together to be molded into anything you can imagine without having to, in the past, 10 years ago, you'd have to get a theme specific to that industry. Now it's kind of, you can roll your own with those two tools. So there are my two main powerhouse tools. And yes, it's just a matter of getting the settings right, which oftentimes you can import pre-configured, depending on the client if they need those things. There's really, I'm not a lot to say on the tech side, kind of nitty gritty, but obviously you have things like Canva and other apps like Auto Active Campaign that all play together with WordPress. Plus myself as a programmer, if I need to add some code tweaks, which usually occurs to people who are paying, more of a higher level e-commerce site, I can apply those too for the project. I know how to program with WordPress, which is one of my unfair advantages, if you'd call it that. I can, work the system.
Yeah, you're like a wizard. Whenever something is not working, well, you find the solution basically. And I think that's where your programming skills come in, because it is a pretty flexible system, WordPress in general, and then you have all these plugins, but there's just always something that is not working, so that's when I call you and say, this is not working anymore, and and then you need to somehow change the code a bit. So I think that's it's never just WordPress standing alone. It's always WordPress communicating with all these other tools that you needed to work with.
And that's a good point, which I actually forgot to mention, which was on top of my mind, is WordPress in of itself is not overly complicated, but then it's kind of very flexible, and you can't have like flexibility and simplicity in the same, box, because if you've got the flexibility, you can do anything you want and go down any path you want.
Yeah.
And then you'll hit some troubles if you don't know WordPress intimately. You'll hit the snags.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where my limitation is. It's like, yeah, I know WordPress, I've been using it for 10 plus years, but then every now and then it's like, why is this not working now? And that's usually because they just like, I add a new tool and then they're not communicating correctly.
Correct.
So yeah. The one thing I wanted to ask you also is in terms of, all these plugins that we can add on and kind of automate everything, which one comes to mind that really has this human connection in mind, where it's like, yes, it's tech, yes, it's automation, but at the same time, it does prioritize a human connection. Anything come to mind?
Well, I think it's like, like driving a vehicle. It's the person behind it that can either run you over or stop and help give you a hand. I mean, most plugins and tech aren't malicious. I mean, there are some that I wouldn't actually get ones from those, internet marketing sites where they sell them individually.
Mm-hmm.
But to think of something that could be used humanely, I mean, you could do social sharing, but then use Yoast SEO to kind of customize what is shared and use your copywriting skills to really talk to the person you want to read it.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's shared on Facebook, for example, they'll see something, like, let's do marketing the right way, and, check out this webinar or whatever, something that's in your standard of how you want to be perceived.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you could do the opposite. You could put put a big picture of a skull and crossbones there as well, and say, buy my webinar or else. So as I said,
what I hear you say is like, it's the tech is not the problem; it's the human who uses the tech the wrong way.
there's a lot
That's
of
the problem.
misconceptions about that too. I mean, you see a lot of funnel building technology out there, and some of it can be quite hyped up.
Mm-hmm.
When all you really need, and people don't realize this, is if you have a good page builder like Elementor, you can get a landing page template like from the Landing Page Factory, which is a website that sells templates, and you can kind of roll your own or have somebody roll it for you. You can integrate it with WordPress because it's actually inside of WordPress. You can appreciate the new speed that WordPress has given you with the caching,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got your landing page, and you can actually have, like with WooCommerce, there's actually a plugin called Cart Flows. You've probably heard of it, and that's by the people who make the theme Astra, and they're really good in the community. They give a lot to the community, so they really got the heart in it. And Cart Flows can actually later create a funnel and actually do like bump offers instead. You don't, these old days when you come back and, oh, by the way, one more thing after your purchase. Instead, you can just do like, you might just say, for an extra $12, would you like to grab, my templates to help you market more humanely, for example.
Right.
And it's almost like a seamless, the choice is theirs, and they don't feel like they're put in a state where, oh, I didn't budget for this. If that makes sense?
Yeah. Again, what I hear is, yes, it matters. So the tech is not necessarily what matters, the human matters, but also when you buy a new tech gadget, plugin, whatever, ClickFunnels, let's talk about ClickFunnels after, but when you buy into something, check the humans who created it. That's a big aha for me, because I remember, I'm just going to say it here, this other tool called Kartra that I just never liked. And the reason I never liked them is because of the humans behind it, because they were giving me this vibe of, let's just see, how much we can get away with and how much we can push the sales and all of that. So that is super important to see, well, what are the founders' ethics? What are their morals? Are they just into making another buck, or are they really building a tool like WordPress where it's not just, for more money, but it's really something, that is supposed to be helping their community?
I agree 100% with you. And I'll admit, some of those things like ClickFunnels and Kartra, they have like their own logo on the landing page, and they're kind of like branded, which is good for their own crowd. But I'll admit, quite personally, because I've seen those sort of crowds that hang out with those sort of things, and not that they're bad, but they're not the crowds I would want to associate with. Yes. So when I go to a landing page and I see one of those symbols, even if it's a Facebook ad, I will click off the ad straight away just because I see that branding. To me, it sends a red flag to me, because I know they offer training as well on how to do traditional sales. And to me, it's something that would give me anxiety if I was to sign up with a lead magnet. Then I get all these upsells.
Yeah, it's so important to recognize that and say, these are the brands I want to actually stay away from because they're just not aligned with my ethics and my humane approach to business.
And I will tell my clients that too. I will tell them, you can use that, but if you use that, I might not be able to help you, but at the same time, you might have trouble with the market you're going after because they're in copywriting. There's this word called sophistication, which means the market's used to, like, say freelancers, for example, and virtual assistants. They're used to seeing these kind of, at last, the solution you've been looking for, the secrets and all that. And then when they see that, they go, ugh, right?
Yeah.
But somebody, that's called sophistication, they've outgrown that. Yeah. Somebody coming from, let's say, traditional to online might get kind of caught up in the romance there.
Yeah, you get pulled into this world where everybody all of a sudden is like that. And again, we're not saying now all our listeners stay away from these two brands, but if you do, see sales funnels from these brands, well, pay extra attention how it makes you feel, whether this is the kind of tech that makes you feel like a human or maybe not. Maybe you're like the sheep in a funnel. Yeah, this is so good. Let's talk about safety and backup and hacks. It's every entrepreneur's nightmare to get hacked. And I remember at least once where my website got hacked. We were still working together as well back then. So yeah, tell us a little bit about, once the website is up, what kind of maintenance do we have to deal with? And it's probably not what most entrepreneurs, want to deal with, but unfortunately it's part of running a business.
It is part of it. I mean, if you're going to run a business, there's certain expenses and you have to budget for them. So obviously updating your website is very important. That's number one, because when you don't update, I've had clients have come into their project to remodel or redo, and I've seen like 20 very pending updates, I'm like, what? This hasn't been updated since 2019, and that brings risks in of itself. And there's ways, I put people on a plan or I update, and if anything goes wrong with the updates, I'm the one responsible, assuming I was the one who was looking after that tech. So I usually don't take on clients who, unless I've built the website, because I can't be responsible for, certain things. Backing up is extremely important. I know you use Updraft, don't you, or something like that? There's some great backup tools.
Yeah.
I've got a few of my own that I use. Security, you asked about security. It's very important, and it's usually one thing you will not appreciate unless you've been hacked. Some people say to me, oh, we don't need that, it's not that important. But you've got to remember, they get your database, and even though they can't get the passwords because they're encrypted, they get the emails of everybody in your database. Let's say you've got a membership site, they get all their emails, or an e-commerce site, worse still, they've got the people's addresses. A lot can go wrong. And particularly in countries like the EU, there are really stringent policies behind privacy, and to have that kind of thing happen is a European's worst nightmare.
Right.
So probably the easiest place in the world to sell security is probably to somebody from the EU.
Yeah.
But so I use WordFence, quite frankly.
It's really also your reputation that's at stake, because if then all your clients get, spammed by who knows who, it always comes back to you. So it's your responsibility really to make sure your website is safe and secure. Yeah.
I had one client who did not want to pay for that service, and she didn't. Sure enough, she got hacked, and then she was paying for it after that.
Yeah, so you always pay more after rather than prevent.
To clean them up too, clean up the mess that hackers have made.
Yeah.
The worst thing is they use your email system too to send out emails a lot of the time. If they're not, as well as getting your database, what's happening is you're actually being blacklisted for your domain name if you don't catch it soon enough. I had a colleague who hadn't touched his e-commerce site for 3 years, who was just making sales. He said, for some reason, I can't update the site. I went in there and I said, wait a minute, why is this person here who worked for you, 3 years ago, got 200 posts next to his username? Wow. And I clicked on it, and there was all these, it wasn't the user, but his username had been hacked somehow. And there was all these political agenda propaganda posts on his blog feed. He didn't even bother to check.
Wow.
So it's very important you keep a track the rest of that.
Yeah. How do you see tech evolve in the next decade or so? How do you think we're like, because I do feel like we're going in this movement towards more back to more humanity, but we're never going to get rid of tech. Actually, there's going to be more tech, there's going to be AI, there's going to be more automation. So how do you see these kind of two different things evolving over the next 10 years?
I see it's going to be like there's going to be a cycle. I think unfortunately we're going to enter before we get to the other side, in that people are going to try and use tech like they did when the internet first started to automate and kind of remember all the times when you had those spam farms like blog posts that were kind of spun and all that kind of stuff like that. I have a feeling people are going to go into this era of trying to leverage these AI copywriting tools, which kind of tends to be the trend. But I think pretty soon they're going to realize they're going to need to use those tools as a guideline as opposed to the actual end result. A lot of people right now are trying to automate their social media posts by having a computer write them for them. And that's, to me, there's no soul, there's no heart in that. And you can see right through it. I mean, just because you see words, I can't explain it, Sarah, but there's some kind of, I'm not spiritual or anything like that, but there's some kind of feeling you get when you read somebody's words and they're kind of human. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess I could be spiritual, but I'm not talking about from a woo-woo point of view. I'm talking
right.
about the feeling of a real human digital touch. It is more intimate than, and I'll follow those people than anything that could be automated or written. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of tools out there in direct response copywriting that these AIs are using. I would study them for, use them for good, study the psychology and how you can help people use the psychology. Like some of those tools will say like, what are objections people have? And maybe it's an objection that people are just scared of, backing up the website in case their server crashes. And you can actually explain how that is not a concern and do it in that sort of way instead of using fear and guilt, which I think are the two most destructive psychological triggers anybody could care to use. So one of the best places to learn copywriting, I believe, is from a person called Joanne Weeb. Have you heard of her?
No.
She's a really great, she's kind of taken copywriting in the new human sense. So there are two sites that have really great copywriting blogs. One is more traditional, but it's still probably worth checking out. I can't remember the exact name of the guy, but he has a website called swipefile.com, which shows you all the traditional swipe files.
Okay.
And Joanne Weep kind of almost wraps this new, she's Copy Hackers. You might have heard of Copy Hackers.
Right. Yes.
She wraps this new kind of human touch around it and kind of grooveness around it.
Yeah. But
So
not in
if
a
you're going to write,
fake kind of way where it's like, feels like too much either.
no, it's not too much. The problem for those people who really got a head on in the beginning is there's too much noise nowadays for them to leverage these slimy tools. If you want, I shouldn't use the word slimy, but everybody now is doing what they love. They're not trying to, buy this ebook and sell it again for, double the price. Everyone's creating their own authentic message. It creates a lot of noise, but it creates a lot of opportunity to be you and to attract the people. I love this quote from one of my good friends, Marie Mason. You are uniquely made for the person you're meant to attract. Something along those lines. It's a really great quote she gave me, but it's kind of like, you have in you, you're made for the person you're meant to be with in terms of your market and your people who follow you. I don't even like to use the word followers because I get a bit embarrassed. I like to think technically they're followers. I know, but at the same time, it's kind of like a community to me.
Right. Yeah, they're just people who agree with your
Thanks, yeah.
worldview, how you see the world, how.
They're not numbers, is what I mean. Yeah, they're just. I actually see, and I know it kind of sounds cliche, but I just, when I'm seen as a number myself, I just, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I think what you're saying is like, yeah, there will be probably can't help but think about the coronavirus. There will be an explosion of, us using more and more and more, even more than now, of these automation and tools and whatnot. But we're getting to the limit where it's like, well, those things just don't work anymore because more and more people see through them. They're like, there is no soul in this ad. I just does feel like automated and slimy. And so we'll have to come back and I think that also means, yeah, we kind of have to maybe, lower our expectations. Instead of, getting 1,000 people onto our webinars, there'll be less people, but it will be the right people. That's how I think of it. So I think we have gone through this era of like everything had to be big and growth and everything. But in the end, like the return on investment and how it made us feel just wasn't worth it. And so we're going towards, smaller communities, more impact, and real authentic.
Share something I never shared with anybody on this podcast. When I first started off and kind of got the idea of things I could do, I was offered these kind of opportunities I would not take now, but at the same time, there was a mind block stopping me because somehow inside of me, there was, like the amygdala, there was something like grabbing me and saying, you can't do this, you're not qualified to do this. This is, there's something internal.
Right.
So I was thinking it'd be nice, but how can I make it? I couldn't find the pieces back then to say, how could I make it, unique? Because that was what people were doing back then. Yeah. How can I make it me? And every time I thought, I should just do a test and put this out there was something that would stop me, would literally freeze like the amygdala in my brain, and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And now I'm grateful for that, actually, that protected me. I thought it was hindering me. I know it now protected me.
Right. It's protecting you from the salesy stuff that just never felt good.
Internet marketing 101.
Yeah. This has been great. Do you want to add anything that you can think of if, someone is just right now thinking about their website and where do I start with all of this? There's a lot of information. Where do I start? Where would you tell them to start?
I'll tell them to actually get introspection in terms of their who. So what I would suggest to do is to look at, I guess some people put competitive research, and that's really what it is. I'll tell them to go to other websites and actually pluck out the problem language and evaluate the sort of messaging other websites are using and how you would want to be different in terms of your messaging. Mm-hmm. But also make almost like an avatar, like make a list of these are typical struggles people are having. These are typical things people want. So you're kind of validating, but also getting more ideas, and then kind of thinking about crafting that message and your offer in your own head, at least before you start trying to tinker with it yourself. There's nothing wrong with installing WordPress and playing around with it. But in my experience, anybody who's done that are just playing, and in the end, they'll say, what do I do next to me? Even my friend, mm-hmm. They say, what do I do next, Mark? Mm-hmm. I'm saying, did you create any pages? I don't know what pages to create. I don't know what to put there. And they know WordPress inside out, right? So I'd research.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Compare and see what you like, but also what you don't like on other people's sites. Yeah, this has been great. Where can people find out more about you and how can they work with you?
Well, the best place to find out about me is go to my website, which is markofapproval.com. And you can pretty much see everything from there, really. You can get my social links to my LinkedIn and connect on them to say, I saw you on Sarah's podcast, I'd like to connect, or go to my Facebook group and check out what I've got going there. Or check the website out, for example. There's no lead magnet at the moment, but I'm going to work on something people can actually, I've got an idea in mind that would help people. I'm going to put something up because a website's never ever done. So my website looks good, but it'll never be done. Neither will yours.
That's a great way to end it. Yeah, it's not like it's something that you just put out there and then you just let it sit there for the next 5-10 years. It's never done. You always go back and tweak things, and it's small little words. I asked my audience for feedback about the new Humane marketing website, and one of my clients said, I really don't like the word grab that you have in your opt-in for the one-page marketing plan, because grab gives me this feeling of there's not enough, you have to do it fast, and there's this grasping aspect to it. I'm like, you're totally right. It's so true. And yet it's a tiny little word, 4 letters. And so I changed it to get, completely different energy to the word get than grab. And that's what we mean, like it's never going to be done. It's always, there's always more of you that you can bring into it. There's always more, like words that you can change, and obviously more plugins you can add. There's, unlimited amount of plugins, but also the content will change. Yeah. So good. I always have one last question that I ask all my guests, Mark, and that is, what are you grateful for today or this week?
The funny thing is, it's kind of the thing I've always been grateful for. I don't believe you have to have one new grateful thing every day. It's probably to look at how far we've come in terms of technology. I mean, I never take it for granted, and I don't think anybody should. Once you had Photoshop, you got Canva as an alternative. You've got so many apps now. There's really almost no excuse, why you can't find something that'll work for you. So I'm grateful that the technology industry has kind of boomed so much. I've been blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah. And there's technology that we're using in our online businesses, never mind the technology that's gonna, cure cancer and, all of these new things in health that are gonna come out, I'm sure, in the next decade. So yeah, totally with you. So grateful for technology.
Yeah.
This has been great. Thanks so much for coming on to the show, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.